kick off this deep dive and dive into a topic that I think we all need to understand better, and that's ADHD. I think there are so many misconceptions floating around about it, and this deep dive hopefully will help clear some of those up.
Absolutely. It's a topic that deserves way more attention than it usually gets.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's way more than just being distracted. And the impact it has on people is just huge.
It is. It really is. And it affects millions, by the way. Both children and adults. So to start, maybe you could just give us a definition of ADHD. What are we really talking about here?
Yeah. So ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is, it's classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder.
Okay.
And that basically means it affects how the brain, develops and functions. And that's particularly true in areas of the brain that are related to attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity.
So it's not just someone's a little bit fidgety or, they space out sometimes.
No.
It's these are real patterns that are affecting their daily life.
Exactly. And it's persistent. It's not just a one-time thing.
Yeah. So I'm curious about what this looks like in practice. What kinds of challenges do people with ADHD face on a daily basis?
Well, okay, so picture this. You're trying to focus on something, like a task or whatever, but it's your mind is a web browser with 20 tabs open, all flashing for your attention.
Oh, wow.
And you start one thing, then something else catches your eye, you never really finish anything. And organization and time management and even just sitting still can feel really difficult.
Wow, that's a really powerful image, those tabs all flashing. I think that's going to stick with me. Yeah. And it makes you realize this isn't just about, willpower or trying harder. There's something else going on.
Exactly. And that's one of the key things to remember about ADHD. It's not just a matter of, laziness or lack of discipline. It's actually linked to real differences in brain chemistry and structure.
Okay, so there's an actual physical basis for these challenges. Right. That's interesting.
For example, research has shown that individuals with ADHD, they often have lower levels of dopamine.
Dopamine, right.
And that's a neurotransmitter that plays a huge role in motivation and reward.
So I guess that explains why, sometimes, people with ADHD might seek out external stimulation or they have trouble staying motivated. It's not just them, choosing to be that way.
Exactly. There's a reason for it, a chemical reason.
Yeah.
It's not just a personality quirk.
Right.
It's actually, rooted in biology.
Right.
And actually, it's not just dopamine. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and impulse control, executive function, that can also function differently in people with ADHD.
Okay, so we're talking about real physical differences in the brain. This isn't just something that people are making up. It's not, bad parenting or lack of discipline like some people might think.
Yeah, no. And unfortunately, those myths are still out there.
They are, yeah.
And they can be really damaging. It's crucial to understand that ADHD is a medical condition. It's not a character flaw.
Right.
It's not about blaming parents or telling someone to just try harder. That completely misses the point.
Yeah, it's like telling someone with asthma to, just breathe better. Clearly, we need to, do a better job of explaining this and debunking those myths. Now, you mentioned the misconception that ADHD is a kid's thing. Right. So let's unpack that one.
Yeah, so it's a common misconception, but the reality is that, while the symptoms often first appear in childhood, ADHD can absolutely persist into adulthood.
Oh, really?
A lot of adults, in fact, go undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for years, struggling with these challenges without knowing why.
That must be so frustrating, right? To feel like you're constantly falling short and not even knowing why. And I imagine that the stigma surrounding ADHD, doesn't make it any easier to seek help.
No, not at all. It can be really difficult. The judgment and misunderstanding that many people with ADHD face can have a real impact on their self-esteem and mental health.
Yeah.
It's tough to see people internalize these negative messages and blame themselves for something that is, not really their fault.
It's what's wrong with me?
Yeah, exactly. And that's simply not the case.
Right. Yeah, it's heartbreaking, Yeah. And all these misconceptions really hold people back. But I think it's time we kind of move beyond just debunking the myths and really get into what it feels like, to live with ADHD.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's one thing to, understand the science.
Right.
That it's a whole other thing to actually grasp what it's like on a daily basis for
Yeah,
people.
exactly. So paint us a picture,
Yeah.
What's going on inside the mind of someone with ADHD?
Okay, so imagine you're trying to have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
But in the background, there's like a radio playing, and your to-do list keeps popping into your head.
Yeah.
And then, you suddenly remember that email you forgot to send.
Right.
It's just like having all these channels broadcasting at once in your mind.
Yeah.
And it makes it almost impossible to, just tune into one thing.
Well, that sounds so overwhelming.
It is.
It's like juggling 5 chainsaws while riding a unicycle.
That's a pretty good analogy.
Right.
But yeah, you're getting the idea. And, that's just the inattention side of it. The impulsivity adds another, whole other layer of complexity.
Right, right.
Imagine feeling this like sudden urge to just, interrupt or blurt out a thought or just act without thinking.
And so it's not just like in the classroom or at work then, it's like social interactions.
Exactly.
Even like managing daily tasks must be so hard.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it can be so exhausting mentally.
Yeah, like their brains are running a marathon every day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Even when they're like trying to rest.
Exactly. And so that brings us back to like all those harmful stereotypes, right? Like, oh, they're lazy.
Unmotivated.
Yeah. Or they, lack discipline. It's just not true.
It's so not true. It's like, folks with ADHD are often putting in twice the effort,
They are.
just to keep up with everything.
It's like they're constantly fighting against, how their brain is wired.
Right.
It's not for lack of trying,
No, not at all.
It's just, their reality. It's not some kind of moral feeling.
So how do we move forward then if we know that ADHD is, rooted in these brain differences? How can we actually support people who are struggling?
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
But, there are a number of approaches that can really help.
Okay. So what are some of those? What options are out there?
So medication is often part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And, for many people, it can really help them manage symptoms. But, and this is key, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. So it's not a magic bullet.
Exactly.
What else can be helpful?
Well, therapy.
Okay.
Particularly, cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT.
Ooh, all right.
That can be super effective. It basically equips people with these coping mechanisms.
Some practical strategies, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they can, manage the challenges they face.
So it's about giving them the tools, not just, trying to fix them.
Precisely.
Love that. What about coaching? I've heard that can be helpful too.
Yeah. So in addition to therapy, coaching can be really good. It's like personalized support in areas like, organization and time management and goal setting.
Okay, so tailored to each individual.
Exactly.
It's about finding what works for them.
Right. It's all about that.
What about lifestyle changes? Can those play a role?
Oh, absolutely. Regular exercise, balanced diet, enough sleep.
The basics, really.
Yeah, the basics. All those things can have a huge impact on managing ADHD symptoms.
Yeah.
And really, those are beneficial for everyone.
Right, not just folks with ADHD.
Exactly.
It's about overall well-being, mental and physical health. So it's a win-win.
I do have to ask though, with all these challenges we've talked about, is there a silver lining? Can ADHD be positive in some ways?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. This is where we shift away from just focusing on the deficits and start recognizing the strengths, because there are a lot.
Okay. Like what?
People with ADHD, they can be incredibly creative.
Oh, interesting.
They're often full of energy and passionate about things.
Oh, wow.
And they think outside the box. And that can be amazing for problem solving and innovation.
And turning those challenges into strengths.
Exactly. It's all about reframing the narrative.
Right.
It's not what's wrong with you.
Right.
It's what's right with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And celebrating what makes you unique. Exactly. It's about celebrating neurodiversity.
Yeah. It's amazing. To think that something that can be so challenging can also be such a strength. I love that.
It really is. And it, kind of highlights how important it is to understand neurodiversity and to embrace it.
Yeah.
And I think, that kind of brings us to a really important point. If you're listening to this and this is resonating with you, if you suspect that you or maybe someone might have ADHD, it's so important to reach out for help. Seek professional help.
Don't hesitate. Talk to a doctor, a therapist, a mental health professional.
Exactly. They can, give you a diagnosis, the right diagnosis, and guide you towards the right resources.
The right support.
Yeah, exactly. And early intervention can really, make such a difference.
Oh, I bet.
It can be life-changing.
Yeah.
It's about empowering individuals to understand themselves better,
Yeah. Right.
to learn those coping mechanisms and how to, like, build a life that works for them.
That works for them, exactly. And, for those of you who have, like, loved ones with ADHD, how can you be good allies? How can you be good supporters? What are some things to keep in mind?
I think it all comes down to, like, listening, really listening with patience and empathy.
Yeah.
Remember that individuals with ADHD, they're not trying to be difficult
No.
or disruptive. It's just their brains work differently.
They do.
And they may need a little extra support,
It's about meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
Validating their experiences and working together.
Yeah, finding those solutions that work for everyone.
And, we can't forget to celebrate their unique qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Like all those strengths we talked about, the creativity, the energy, the out-of-the-box thinking.
Oh, yeah, encourage that. Nurture it. You'll be amazed by what they can accomplish.
Well, this deep dive has been so insightful, I think. We've talked about the brain science, the lived experience, the support, the understanding. It's clear that there's still so much to learn,
There is.
Yeah.
And I hope this has really sparked, like, a curiosity for our listener.
I hope so, too.
To keep learning.
Yeah.
To, like, challenge that stigma around ADHD.
Yes, absolutely. And as you, listener, as you go and explore this topic more, here's something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, knowing all this stuff about the brain science behind ADHD, how do you think this might change, like, how society views neurodiversity and how we support it? That's something to think about as you continue on your journey. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.